Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
And welcome back, everyone, to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute, a podcast where we are breaking down and celebrating the films of Gene Wilder 1 minute at a time. And for our first season, we are breaking down the film Young Frankenstein. I'm Alan Sanders.
And I'm Walt Murray.
And joining us once again, the guys from the BK radio show, heard on live radio, not a podcast, but live actual radio.
Ooh.
We have Barry King and Mike Clark from BK on the Air. Welcome.
There's absolutely no way I could have said that fast.
I know. Wow, that was great. But thank you. We're glad to be here again.
BK, the radio show. I guess it changed names, I guess.
You know,
As opposed to BK the what?
Yeah, well, you have the merchandising coming. BK
the more
the hat.
times you screw up the name, he can have one.
That's true. Yeah,
Do we need to get a Mrs. BK to confirm what the BK is besides the show?
Well, we have BK the toothbrush, BK the
we're on the Wilder
back
cruise.
scratcher.
Suddenly this has turned into Spaceballs.
Yeah, the weirder cruise.
Well, we're glad to be here. I'm glad to be back.
It's good to have you guys back. We needed your expertise because we're going to be dealing a lot with the creature today and some of the lore behind the original Frankenstein franchise and how we match up with this Young Frankenstein movie. So let's just tell everyone where we are to begin this week. If you remember, when we last left, Inspector Kemp was having a game of darts with Young Frankenstein after they had sedated his monster and left him feeling a little out of sorts. So the dart game is continuing at the very beginning of this minute, and at the very end, young Dr. Frankenstein is reminding Inspector Kemp the doors are always open. So, Walt, let's go to you first, being the co-host of the Wilder Ride. If you remember, we ended last week with this dart game in progress. It seemed like we had a pretty good discussion about how, even though Inspector Kemp is a little wacky and zany, he was making the argument of the whole nature versus nurture and genetics and science versus beliefs and superstition. And it was a really good discussion behind all of this silliness on the surface.
Yeah, Inspector Kemp is not one to be underestimated, I don't think. And, we talked a little bit about the fact that it would be great to know a little bit more about him. But he has apparently a heck of a backstory. And but obviously a bright guy, knows what's going on, and I can see why the town folk have kind of looked to him for advice and wisdom.
You certainly want to lend him a hand. That's what yeah. He needs some help.
I'm going to say he gets a lot of, disability?
Totally serious. Now, so went right down the crapper.
Yeah, he's on the Transylvania version of SSDI.
Mm-hmm. Lost one eye, lost an arm.
Well, let me ask you this, Mike. According to the notes I had, that this character, Kenneth Mars, was spoofing actually a character by the name of Inspector Krull from Son of Frankenstein.
That's correct. Lionel Atwill played him in the movie, and they even have a game of darts in that as well. And it's kind of the same thing. He lost his arm because of the rampaging monster, much like Kemp did, apparently. Do we know where Kemp lost his eye?
We don't know about the eye. We do know in some of the lines we talked about last week that were removed when he first arrives. He does talk about how the last time he met up with one of the Frankenstein monsters, it took his arm off.
Right.
We don't get it in the final version of the movie, but it is in the script. So it is definitely taking off of Inspector Krull.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That is correct.
Say anybody?
Scared me there for a second. I thought we had died.
Wow. Did I forget to feed you? I bring you in for expertise. Well, I think we just got it.
I was just looking
tune
for
in
wisdom.
tomorrow for another edition of the Wilder Ride.
That was a great 1 minute podcast.
The wife's going to be happy. We're not going to take forever tonight to get this done.
Well, it's a series of 5-minute episodes.
But it is interesting. Do you remember? I have never seen Son of Frankenstein, but apparently there was a dart game in there as well.
Yes.
Why? Was it just to pass the time? Was it because he wanted to show he still had skill with his arm, playing darts with only one arm?
I don't know if it's that. I think it might be just, and this might be a problem with American audiences or something. Darts, of course, is considered pretty much a European game. And it seems whenever there's some kind of sporting event or conversation, they have a game of darts. Because I guess we'll accept that. in relation to Son of Frankenstein, it's almost the same thing. The inspector has come there to talk to Wolf Frankenstein, who plays Basil Rathbone, plays him, to find out, are you going to continue your father's work? It's almost the same thing. So I think that's, again, why the scene is in there, because we all heard that this is supposedly a sequel to those first, 5 Frankenstein films.
Right. So now, Walt, when we last left, we saw the inspector play a little cheating, took all the darts, stuffed them in the board, and then did this little thing where he was like banging his hand against his chest and making the noise. And now it's the doctor's turn. And after this conversation where we pick up here in the beginning of this minute, he's really wanting to mess with the doctor.
Oh, yeah, he is really sticking it to him. And, first, right as he's about to throw, shouting out Frankenstein and, getting that jump out of him. And, of course, that one sails through the window, which is awesome. And, then the second one, which I had to go back to, I think it was 2 or 3 minutes back, maybe 58 or so, where they started this dart game. But he has this dart backwards and launches that one. And
I think it's the only one he picks up backwards and holds. All the
it
rest
is
are the right way.
Yeah, I look back. It was minute 59, and I look back. All of them have been held normally except this one.
Is this the one that hits the cat?
Yes.
This
This
is
is the one that
one
hits the cat.
Maybe it was such a aerodynamic problem when he threw it that it flipped around 4 or 5 times and sought out the cat and hit it.
It must be. I played some darts in college to earn beer, and
Earn beer?
Well, you can in the bars.
Wow.
You can have dart championship
oh yeah,
games
we used to
in pubs
play
and
for
bars.
beer all the time, and the tip end of the dart is a lot heavier than the back end of the dart, so it would be all over the place if you threw from with the back end forward.
Well, what I like at the very beginning here, we caught the very last end of the word when he goes through the window, as he was saying, if you remember from last minute, from Friday, he was saying, but this is Transylvania! And that's how he makes the first one go flying through, and then he goes, and you are a Frankenstein! And the second one goes through the window. And then the third dart is one he picks up backwards and still throws it forward, even though he's got feathers forward. It would never in a million years fly the way it does.
No.
But we do hear what it hits.
Yes, and of course, this is the third and final appearance of Mel Brooks.
Yes.
It's Mel.
And it's ad-libbed on the set.
Mel Brooks decided to make the noise of the cat.
Mel's playing the pussy.
Mel Brooks actually said, as a boy, I could make the greatest cat in pain sounds in the world, and therefore just chose to do it on the set. Just
That's great. That is great.
Funny.
And so perfectly timed. And
But also, where was this cat? It's the invisible cat.
It's never seen.
You never see the cat.
I've never seen it. Well, we know why.
Yeah,
it's
you
never
never-
seen it yet.
Yeah, yes, it went somewhere to die, but
It's been impaled.
Yes.
It's in the bone. Hey, we're back to the
Well,
beginning.
yeah, there you go.
Darts, you've got some history about
well, no,
darts
I was
and
just going to
whatnot.
say, let's talk about darts,
But
shall we?
I can hold a dart, I can throw a dart, but I cannot play darts worth the
No, and I'm the same.
I sympathize with Frederick.
Yes, well, actually, the
Well,
first
he
time
did
he does
well.
very well in the first
Well,
time.
It's
It
not
wouldn't have
until
been-
someone gets in his head.
Yes, and but yeah, darts is normally played with 3 darts per team, and again, there's different variations, but that's usually the version. So the fact that they're playing with 5 is kind of not normal, but I guess it's to
Mel
keep
Brookish.
it's to keep the game going,
Yeah.
and the gags, which is kind of cool. If you want to track a record of the 5 darts, 1 is stuck in the wall from the earlier minute, 2 go out the window, 1 hits the cat, and 1 goes behind him and apparently shatters a lot of glassware.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't know what was back there.
I am glad you bring this up. I was going to ask. Now, none of us are all necessarily domestic, but we all have significant others in our lives. Do we normally put the good china on the hearth of the fireplace when we're in the midst of a game of darts?
Oh, yeah, between the fireplace and the dartboard.
Yes.
Right on the rock hearth where it could possibly crash to the
Right.
floor.
Well, just that, and
Absolutely.
1 little dart. I know you said the tip is heavy, but still, this sounds like it goes through like 5 or 6 vases and 12 plates
This is
when
like
it
a
finally hits.
sledgehammer.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is like the lawn jart.
I don't want to jump ahead, but there are many more than 3 darts that were thrown.
Well, yes, we find that out.
I think it's playing for about
Yes,
4
it is
hours.
coming up. Yes. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that does appear to be the case here.
Dart machine gun.
Later. Let's get into the conversation, though. What's going on is, and Walt, we talked about this. We both surmised when we were chatting last week with our guests, this is sort of like that Columbo moment. He may be on the surface acting like a goofball, But he's really trying to shake the doctor up to see if he can learn something. I mean, this is a typical police technique.
Yes.
Yeah,
Or with
absolutely.
Columbo would usually trip you up into falling into the trap of saying you did it in no uncertain terms. Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
and you want to kind of lead the person where you want them to go, but you want them to walk that path as you're talking.
Well, having watched enough Investigation Discovery, I see that with the police. I was like, first I'm going to be their friend, and then I'm going to kind of lead them where I want them to go until they mess up.
The only thing the inspector is missing is his trench coat.
Yes.
Well, he's got a different
Columbo.
uniform,
Like
but
Columbo.
what he does here is when he realizes, and there's the thing, he recognizes he's rattling the doctor because he has that line, you seem unusually upset by this discussion.
Wow, is Kenneth Mars in the studio?
No. Wow, we couldn't find him.
It's amazing.
I'm doing my poor imitation of Kenneth Mars.
What did you say?
That was Megatron Transformer over there doing it. He can do that.
Doing my best. And of course, Dr. Frankenstein is trying to play it off, saying, "Oh no, not in the least," as he, throws another dart like completely anywhere but at the target.
Yes. Well, then you could tell he's getting more riled, which again, maybe, and the last fact I had for this is Basil Rathbone did not like being in horror films, even though he is in quite a few of them. In fact, had a disdain for them, according to this. And that is probably why in the scene in Son of Frankenstein, he is like chewing scenery like there is no tomorrow. And they're like, well, this is probably because he didn't want to be there. And it's especially during the dart scene. So that's kind of cool.
When you say chew the scenery, you mean like he totally overacted?
Oh, yeah, he was
so
over the top
never
performance. Yeah, over the top
Basil
performance.
Rathbone overact?
Yes, he did.
I know that is
Hey,
hard to believe.
Wow.
Hey.
No, he
He's
did.
good, yes.
He did. But yeah.
But yeah, an over-the-top performance, as it was called, where I looked it up.
Let me point out something else in the scene that we're looking at right here, that when they're still beginning to throw the darts, or whenever they cut back to the inspector and Frankenstein.
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 I'm sorry.
Did you notice the candles are lit?
Yes.
So we know that the room is not very treacherous compared to some other scenes.
That's
that we're
right.
talking about.
Yeah, definitely when it's treacherous, you don't want any light.
Kenneth Mars is a fantastic character actor playing Inspector Hans Wilhelm Friedrich Kemp in the scene. I understood him without him explaining the lines, but Mel Brooks did this again in Blazing Saddles with Jack Starrett as Gabby Johnson, using a character that mumbles. You can't really you really couldn't tell what Gabby was saying. But I think he kind of repeated it with Gabby in Blazing Saddles. But Kenneth Mars, his name is Inspector Hans Wilhelm Friedrich Kemp. Now, I was wondering, did anybody find out how they came up with the character name? Because I did a little digging, and I may have found out if it's not this, then this is just a big coincidence.
The only one I know of is in The Invisible Man. The other scientist's last name is Kemp.
But just the last name, right?
Just the last name, none of the others. And he's not German or anything.
We know that Kenneth Mars, Mel Brooks liked to call Kenneth Mars his house kraut.
Nice.
He was also in The Producers. Who did he play in The Producers? I had it somewhere. He played Franz, the Nazi in Franz. Here's what I found out. A German writer named Hans Hayek wrote a novel in 1925 entitled Friedrich Wilhelm I. So he's taken one name out of the author's name and two names out of the name of the book. I'm like, did they use a variation of that name for the inspector's name? That's as close as I could get to doing any research on Kenneth Mars's character.
So you just stopped after that? You didn't pursue the rest of it?
I did look a little further, which title of that book is called Antman und der Gotts et Erden, which translates to Steward and Servant of God and Earth, whatever that means. So that's the book I actually found out that he wrote. And I also found out that you guys remember Stanley Kubrick's film Dr. Strangelove, right?
Yes.
Do you remember Peter Sellers' character, Dr. Strangelove, in the film with his arm,
Yes.
much like Inspector Kemp? Well, I was wondering, did they use that as some sort of, is it an homage, or did it stick in Mel Brooks or Gene's mind when they were doing this? Because the differences were, Strangelove came out in 1964. This movie came out in 74. Both characters had a fake mechanical arm that they manipulated. Now, in Dr. Strangelove, his arm had a mind of its own, and he'd have to pull it back down. They both, one wore dark glasses. Kemp wore a dark monocle and a patch. And now, his hair in Dr. Strangelove is about as wild as Gene Wilder's hair is. So I don't know if there's any correlation to any of that, but that's the other route that I took, was looking at how closely those two characters were related. And the character in Dr. Strangelove is German as well.
Well, actually, you are absolutely correct. Kenneth Mars actually was allowed to play a lot with this character. Back in the script, there was nothing about doing all these machinations with his arm or having like some kind of wild posing it, putting it in places and doing all these things. He did have a fake arm in the script, but Kenneth Mars did in fact bring shades of Dr. Strangelove to the game, and both Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder just loved it so much they let him keep this entire shtick that he had come up with, all this posing his arm. So instead of in Dr. Strangelove where the arm has a mind of its own, in this case, his arm has no ability to do anything on its own, so it requires the other hand to put everything where it needs to go.
So if he had Dr. Strangelove's arm in this and his arm that he has there, it would have made for a really crazy scene. He would have had an out-of-control arm and an arm that did really nothing he wanted to until he moved it manually, so that would be even crazier.
Could have been an interesting thing.
Well, I feel kind of good now. That's not bad.
Nice.
Good job,
That's kinda
BK.
cool. I must win something for that.
You win the chance to come back again if you want.
Yes.
I'll do that.
You were the guest of the night.
I'll come back 4 more times. How about that?
Well, after the fifth dart that Freddy throws, he says, "I find it all extremely amusing, that's all." And throwing the last dart, he says, "Well, that was fun. And now, if you don't mind, Inspector, I'm a little tired." And then Kemp gives his final monologue, which I think is pretty darn funny here. There is one change from what he delivers in the movie versus what was in the script, because the script actually called for him to repeat what he said back at the town hall. Remember, we had the angry HOA meeting where all the villagers were upset about what the Frankenstein castle was doing. And he was talking about his grandfather's footsteps. What he was supposed to say is, "Then I may give the villagers your complete assurance that you have no interest whatsoever in carrying on in your grandfather's footsteps?" That was the script. And he doesn't say that. He doesn't say that at all. He says, instead of footsteps, that he carries on in his grandfather's work. And I'm wondering, because remember the last time he said footsteps, nobody in the audience, nobody in the town hall remembered, and you could hear what he was saying. They're like, "Whoa, what?" He was like, footsteps, in his grandfather's footsteps. And so even he becomes aware when his dialect is so thick and so over the top that he has to sometimes bring it back down for his audience because he'll do it a couple of times when they don't understand what he's saying.
Oh, yeah.
And the good inspector has a love-hate relationship with his arm because he talks to it, if you've noticed.
Yeah, in the next minute we're going to see a great dialogue.
I'm sorry, I keep wanting to jump ahead, and it's going to be hard not to do that. But I want to mention a couple more things that he's been in, Kenneth Mars, and you guys may remember some of it. I got first introduced to Kenneth Mars, who plays Inspector Kemp, on a show in the 70s. It was a variety show. I know some of us might remember it, some of us not, called Sha Na Na.
I remember Sha Na Na.
Okay, he was a regular on Sha Na Na, and I remember seeing him in the show. And then I saw him in a TV episode of Alice, the TV show Alice, with Mel's Diner and all that stuff. And he was playing a truck driver that Flo was dating. Again, character actor. Funniest part of the show was him in that episode. And you guys remember Fletch with Chevy Chase?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Do you remember Stanton Boyd in the movie Fletch?
Of course.
Who said, "Jesus H. Christ," on a popsicle stick. That's Kenneth Mars playing Fletch with Chevy Chase.
Nice.
He was a fantastic. I always wanted to be an actor growing up for years. Still do, but I settle for radio. So still act every Saturday. But I always wanted to be an actor, but I never wanted to be a leading man. I always wanted to be a character actor because I wanted to be the guy where you would come in and be in a scene, and then people would leave and go, "That movies are great. The star was great. But that one guy that came in for that 10 minutes and went crazy, that was great." But I always wanted to do that.
Don't know his name.
And be that. Yeah, I know that guy, but I don't know what his name is, but I see him in everything. That's the kind of character actor that I always wanted to be. The Apple Dumpling Gang rides again. Remember the Apple Dumpling Gang movies
that
by
was
Walt
great.
Disney?
I love that movie.
79,
Oh, yeah.
he played Marshall Woolly Bill Hitchcock in it, which is again a play on words too. And he was a busy voiceover artist. My goodness, the Smurfs, Animaniacs, Darkwing Duck, Batman the Animated Series,
Oh, yeah.
Life with Louie, Duckman, the Jetsons. He was King Triton in The Little Mermaid. Was Kenneth Mars. That's the voice that he did for
I
The
did
Little
not
Mermaid.
know
was
that.
King Triton.
That's cool.
He also did the same voice in the Land Before Time series as well, which was Grandpa Longneck. He passed away on February 12th, 2011. So Kenneth Mars was a fantastic character actor, the kind that don't always get their due. But he certainly does in Young Frankenstein because he's one of my favorite characters in the film.
Well, he obviously has no problem playing with his voice, whether it's dialects, accents, playing around where it's almost unintelligible, or just giving a normal performance. He's got great command of his voice.
A lot more voiceovers work that I didn't even mention that he did. The list is too long, but he's really talented.
All right, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. It's related to this scene, but I wanted to ask each of you, so I'm going to lead into this question a bit to give your brains a chance to warm up. This is the time that some of us in our lives might recognize as being involved in a negative way with law enforcement. Most of us don't have a pleasant experience, whether it's being pulled over or, I don't know, in my case, taking a car that I just bought, driving through someone's yard, and apparently getting caught and finding the police outside my door, outside my parents' door.
Learning things all the
knocking,
time.
Yes, learning all the time.
Saying apparently I had driven through and burned someone's yard, and I was about to go to the Hooskow on that one.
You trenched a yard is what we used to call
it.
Wow.
We were coming back from a concert, so my question was going to be what that you can relate and feel safe sharing your worst involvement maybe in a law enforcement story.
Have the corner on this because I really don't have
I've
one.
got two.
Okay, good.
Actually, I've got three.
He's got three, all right. There's three of us.
The first
so they'll
one,
take care of it.
the first one was the one when I was still a teenager and went to a concert, burned this guy's yard, and apparently my dad got mad at me because I didn't think enough to rinse the car off. He goes, "I just rinsed the tires off. We wouldn't be out here with the cops." I'm like, "Oh, that's great, Dad.
You could have drove through the guy's living room. I wouldn't have
Rookie
cared.
mistake.
Rookie mistake.
exactly.
I wasn't good at this."
That's great.
Thankfully, we were able to, my dad and the cops talked it out, and I had to go over to the guy's house the next day and fix his yard, which was a better price to pay because when they tell you, "Hey, do you mind just sitting in the back of the car for a second?" And I'm sitting there, wait, what? And they're like, "Yeah, we need you we're just talking, but we need you to go ahead so you don't take off anywhere." I was like, "I'm not going to go anywhere. My dad's here." They're like, no, we need you to sit in the back of the car. The sudden dawning realization that this isn't a joke, that set in real hard for
They
me when
put
I
you in
was
the back of the car and closed the door.
They closed the door.
Oh, no.
And guess what?
That's
You can't open those.
That's the
No, I
loudest
know.
door close you ever heard in your life.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
I was like, "Oh my god!" For going through somebody's yard.
I'm in real trouble here.
It's like, it suddenly got real. Like I was feeling sleepy and like all right, whatever. Then I was like wide awake, and that panic set in. You know, like when your body dumps about 2 gallons of adrenaline in your body, and everything seems
It
moving
usually
in slow
sobers you up
motion.
very fast.
It can do that. Thank God I hadn't been drinking.
Yeah, I know.
I was underage. But then, when this all was said and done, I had the shakes for about 30 minutes. I had so much adrenaline I was coming down off of that, So, Walt, you have a law enforcement story that you want to share?
I'm going to plead the fifth for the most part. Probably my best one.
you could look up yourself, since you're a PI. and
Oh,
find out
no,
what you
no.
did.
All right.
Well, I have a reason for asking these, but for right now, I'm watching you figuring out what you're going to say and not say.
He's editing in his mind right now.
Yeah, there are a couple.
You're still not allowed back in Athens, are you?
Well, it depends.
I see.
It depends on what time of day it is and if it's dark yet. So, well, probably the best one. When I was in high school, we used to have what's called Egg Fest. And we would all, it was the senior class versus the junior class. And one of my buddies' dads worked for an egg distribution company.
That's convenient.
And I had the biggest car. I had the Dragon Wagon. So I went to his house. We load the back end of the Dragon Wagon full of eggs, and there are about 10 of us in the car. So we go out to where we're going to have the egg fest. Well, the cops are already there.
They're waiting on you?
Oh, yeah, they're
waiting.
waiting on us. I mean, and they're like hundreds and hundreds of kids that come. This ended up on CNN my freshman year of college.
Oh, God.
So we're like, oh, the cop. Oh, yeah, we're on a podcast. So we take off, and the cops are all following everybody. We end up back at the middle school. And the middle school, at the back end of the lot, there's a road that ran through. So the police had stopped one of our friends back there. And one of the guys was like, "Come on, let's egg the police car." And I'm like, I don't think that's a good idea. And my buddy Kurt is like, "I'm on probation. I can't egg a police car." So
Hope he's changing the
all
names.
of a sudden, all of Jay's
the
eggs
innocent.
start flying over the fence, and they're hitting the tree limbs. And the police officer's like, "Is it raining?" And he looks up, and there are eggs just raining down on him and his car.
No.
And he comes flying at us, hand on his gun, and we're like, "Whoop! Let's go." And we probably had that look like the Three Stooges when their eyes get huge and they all take off. That was probably the closest to really taking a beating I've ever I've ever had.
The cops.
Yeah, well, some from Category A, some from Category B.
Now, hold that thought in mind then. BK, do you have even one incident? I don't care if you're arguing with a cop over a speeding ticket and you're just was under your voice grumbling.
No.
It's no bullshit.
Really?
I don't. I mean, I really don't. I did something that I didn't get caught for once, and I never had a run-in with a police officer. The only police officer I had a run-in with was just speeding. You know, he pulled over, you got a ticket or you got a warning. That's pretty boring, but that's
it.
all that I've done. Yeah. But I did.
You're not going to be able to play along with question
I can't.
2.
I know. I did hide from a police officer once, though. And he never found me.
On the way here today.
Right. Yes, on the way here.
No, that's the FCC. They're
That's
still looking for him from the last time.
Georgia Association of Broadcasters.
Well, that would be me.
My dad had bought a 67 Plymouth Barracuda. We're talking 318 cubic inches, a billion horsepower, can climb a tree, can fly, whatever you want it to do. And he says, hey, you want to take it for a ride? Well, that was his first mistake. So I'm 17 years old. He lets me drive it down the road. And, you know, I'm about on a back country road, and I'm just flooring it. I'm doing about 118 miles an hour on a country road, believe it or not. Cop passes me. You know how you'll meet the cop and you'll go by.
Oh, yes.
Well, then you see him in the rearview mirror. The lights come on.
Yep.
And like, he's going to do a U-turn and come right after me doing 118 miles an hour. So what do? No, I didn't slow down. I went faster. So I went faster about 3 or 4 miles down the road, turned down a pull-off road, and then I turned my lights off and just sat there till I saw him go by. And then I pulled back out very slowly
Turned into
and went
speed
back.
buggy.
Who put the antifreeze in my carburetor?
That's right. I turned into Herbie. Well, not Herbie. He's fast. So I went back home with it. That's the closest I really ever got.
So,
if I'd been stopped, it would have been pretty bad.
Watching
So.
Smoking the Bandit really
That
paid
did help
off
me.
for
It
you.
was 1981. So it was
Exactly.
it was post Smoking the Bandit. Yes. So.
Mike, what about you? Run in with the law.
This will take a while.
I would no.
Pick the one. Pick one.
There's two, and they're not as exciting as like Walt's or yours. But there was
We'll let you know.
and this was just a few years ago
Wait.
at MegaCon.
Oh, really?
Why are
Remember,
you-
did time in Florida. Anyway,
Why
no.
are you all red? This should be
Because
good.
I'm laughing is what it is. Your guys' story. All right, they have a convention down there called MegaCon. And I had gone down, and I'm as
You went to MegaCon and got arrested?
not arrested, but I am dressed. This is good. And I am dressed as a character called Captain Cold, who happens to be one of the Flash's villain. If you're not familiar with this character, he kind of looks like an Eskimo with square glasses and like this blue and yellow suit. And he carries
You were cosplaying
He carries
a
a
gun.
freeze gun. A purple freeze gun. One that unfortunately didn't really fit in my holster very well, so I'm carrying it. And we're walking towards the convention center, and all of a sudden I hear, "You're gonna have to put your gun away." And I'm like, what? I
couldn't even.
Which is
What are you,
exactly what the
Kenneth
police-
Mars?
No, and that was it. And that was exactly what it was. That's why don't change that. That is and I'm sorry. And I hear it. He repeats it. I'm not going to do it again.
Was it because you couldn't hear him or something?
No, it was
sounded
he was
like
he
that?
was sitting in the car
and
going out
so
through
it was
whatever
PA
his
system.
PA system.
Wow.
But I don't know if he was swallowing the microphone or what. But I couldn't understand, and I was like, "What?" And then he went up a little bit. We're gonna hit the road. Gonna hit this. I'm like, "What?" I have no idea what
I think
you're
I just
saying.
ordered at Zaxby's. I'm in the
Exactly.
drive-through lane.
So finally he gets out of the
take
car
whatever you
and in
get.
a normal voice says, "You're going to have to put that in the holster." I'm like, "Oh, thank you." And I start walking forward. I'm like, "It's fake." And he's like, "No, stay right there." And I was like, "Oh, sorry."
Did you see his right hand suddenly go to his
He's like,
hip?
yeah, exactly. I'm like, "Oh, sorry, wait. It's just a water pistol painted purple. I swear."
And it's going in the holster right
And
now.
it did. And it didn't fit very well, but it went in the holster.
He's like,
Exactly. I said, "That's about as far down as
You're,
that's going to go."
You're absolutely right. That's nowhere near as dangerous as our stories was. My
But,
no,
God.
but his is every bit as fun.
But so finally, then he
could have
said,
said
I was
Mr.
like,
Freeze.
"Thank you." He's like, "Well, you got to understand, the people see someone carrying a gun and stuff." I'm like, "Oh yes, I'm sure there are a lot of blue Eskimos carrying purple guns around Orlando."
At a convention,
At a-
yeah,
Well, you
probably
are in
is.
Orlando.
In Orlando,
I mean,
exactly.
a dangerous Smurf is
Now,
a dangerous Smurf.
In
Come
case
on.
everybody's wondering, no, I did not say that. I thought that, but I did not say it. And I was like, sorry, I didn't. He's like, once you're inside the convention center, you can take it out. So you're saying I can't kill people on the street, but I can kill people in the convention center.
Well,
Is that the point?
He was he was only guarding from the street to the curb. That's it.
Yep,
You
and
can,
that
you
was
can
it.
freeze them.
But I couldn't do anything with that. Even the water pistol part didn't work. But anyway, that was probably one of the funniest and worst that I've had. The other was, and you remember this story.
Wait, he's going on to part two.
Well, this part two. This was even earlier. I think I was in the car with our friend Aram at the time, and we went past. There was an accident, and so they were kind of routing people around. So I didn't have my Camaro then. I don't think I still had my. No, I had my Camaro. Never mind. I go past.
He's going off into a tangent.
I did. I turned into Grandpa Simpson telling a story.
Was it a full moon that night or not?
So I go past, and I thought I went by at a reasonable rate of speed, and it was the other cars seemed to go past at the same rate of speed. Suddenly, I'm getting pulled over. He walks over, but he's on the passenger side, and put down the window, and he's like, "Went through there kind of fast, didn't you, Bubba?" I do not like the nickname Bubba. I cannot stand the nickname Bubba. If you call me Bubba, I will end you.
So did you end the cop?
I immediately was like, "What did you call?" And my friend was like, "No, stop, stop." And I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, officer. I thought I was going slow enough." He's like, "Well, you just be more careful there, bub." I'm like, "I'm going to kill you."
Well, that brings me to my part two of why I asked about law enforcement stories, because, we always talk big about what we would do if confronted with law enforcement, but when we know we've done something bad, I don't know about you, I turned into a blithering idiot. I didn't know how to respond. I started to almost get that little bottom lip quiver, please don't put me in the back of the police car. I mean, because I was still a teenager, but now, 2 hours before, I was the coolest guy in the room. I was like, "Yeah, did you see me tear through that yard?" Now I'm like, "Hey, please don't put me in jail."
Well, let's just say this, that hardened criminals would have heard all of our stories just now and would have laughed their asses off.
Oh, yeah.
They very much would
In
have.
prison, they're like, yeah.
But
okay.
if you look at the way Gene Wilder is obviously, his character is a little put off by Inspector Kemp, and Inspector Kemp is intentionally needling him. But on a scale of 1 to 10 versus how you handle the cops, Walt, and how Gene is handling Inspector Kemp, where would you rank your story versus Gene Wilder here? 10 being the best, you handled it perfect. You walked away smelling like a rose. 1, that's me.
Well, the smart thing would have been not to be with morons who throw eggs at cops.
Yes.
So,
Just make omelets instead.
I'm not sure where that falls on the 10 scale, but don't be around dummies. So I failed miserably.
So, because I'm sure you were like me, we all talk big and tough. What we would do, if that cop were to come over here, I'd tell him what for.
Well, here's what
the reality?
Here's what I could honestly say in my blustering. I'll show that cop, and then I'll get home, and my dad will kill me.
And you wish you'd saw the cop.
I wish the cop had done his worst. No, I didn't handle the whole situation real well. I knew better than to let some of those guys know I had eggs in the car. I never should have run from the cops. There's a long list of what not to do's there.
Well, how do you think Gene's handling himself with Inspector Kemp?
Oh, I think he's doing great. He's not giving anything away. He's somewhat keeping his composure, for Gene. And he's kind of answering his inquiries the way that he's managing the conversation as much as he can.
Mike, what about you in comparison to how you handled dealing with the officer or officers in your particular stories?
Well, there was one in each, and the MegaCon one I think I handled pretty well because I was calm and almost turned into a blithering idiot because I was afraid, but then I kept my cool. The other one, not so much because I had to be restrained by my friend, but luckily made it out unscathed.
So who would have handled it better, you or Dr. Frankenstein in these situations?
Froderick.
Froderick. Yeah, I'm giving Froderick 2 thumbs up. You can tell he's flustered, but I get flustered, or at least I used to before I became much better friends with officers, but just being around any kind of like armed, badged authority figure, the way I grew up, I was almost in fear of law enforcement. Yes. And so I would have been kind of like how Dr. Frankenstein's acting now having done nothing wrong. So the fact that he knows, the town knows what he's done, they know the family history, and he knows there's a live monster downstairs.
This
and he's
has happened
handling it
5
pretty
times
well.
before.
Yes.
And
So I think he's doing a pretty darn good job.
But also, Frederick is taking a lot of liquid courage in this scene. If you
Well, there is some of that in the background.
He's doing that, but
Yep.
he's also he can't even, the inspector can't even tell that he's hiding something from the bad way that he's playing darts, because obviously our inspector can't play darts either because he has to cheat to win the game.
Which, by the way,
So-
with the cheating, could kind of change gears. Now, you said tap his chest. I always thought with the motion he's making, he's like popping his finger.
That's what I thought until you look really, really close.
At his mouth.
He's making the noise with his mouth, and he's slapping his hand against his chest. So it's
Oh,
like,
okay. Yep.
that's what he's doing.
See, he's the man of impressions tonight.
I noticed
He did
that.
perfect.
He really is.
That's
How did
awesome.
the
I'm going to come back tomorrow night.
Inspector
You
Kemp,
know,
you know, he can, and I'm
Well, I
not
love that's the
playing
only
darts
spit
with
take-
Dr. Frankenstein. I'm listening to BK on the air.
no, I want to see him do Elizabeth in the next show. See if he sounds like Elizabeth.
Wait till we get there.
Okay, good.
But, that was last Friday. We get the one spit take, which actually, like you said this before. I actually quoted you when we had a different guest. I
It's
said,
true.
you can use one spit take in one performance of one play or movie, and it works. Any more than that, it becomes
Not
dumb.
5. I saw a stage production once that used 5 in the show, which I knew was not in the script. They just improvised it, and it came off as just really silly.
One timed exactly right when you least expect it
Right.
can be funny.
And you've got to do it perfectly.
Right.
Even one.
Oh, yeah.
You're right.
In this case, you know, what I love about Gene Wilder's spit take is that he looked more like a fountain. He was like a little stream of water. It wasn't a spray.
Yeah,
It was
right. In fact, let's try to make one of us spit take next episode.
I'd rather not.
Blow up the board.
All right. Well, as we begin to wrap up here, minute 61. Mike, anything that we didn't cover that you might have had in your notes during this particular minute?
Oh, no. All I'd like to add is nice grouping.
Nice grouping. And BK, what about you? Anything on your notes that we did not cover for this particular minute?
Nothing we didn't cover. I did want to get in all the facts about Kenneth Mars being the fantastic character actor that he is, and a lot of them in this movie. You have to be a good actor to do comedy. We know you just can't just do comedy. A lot of dramatic actors can't do comedy, but a lot of comedic actors can do drama. And he was a funny guy. If you want to just get right down to it.
Walt, anything about you?
No, I think Kenneth Mars really stands out in this minute, but he really is. He is a talented actor. He even played the grandfather on
Malcolm in the Middle.
And Malcolm in the Middle.
That's right.
Yeah,
See,
and he was
all
just
over the place.
fantastic.
He was.
So definitely one of those people that you look back and every time you think through what it is he has done, it is really an amazing body of work.
Well, we would like to invite you guys to come back tomorrow because we're definitely going to be dealing with Frankenstein's monster, his creation, and you guys have a pretty good background in discussing classic movies and nostalgic geekiness, as you like to call your show.
Oh, yeah. Maybe I can wind up doing something against a cop between now and tomorrow that I can talk about.
on your way home.
It'd be cool if you could bring a participation story because,
I'll do it between now
Maybe
and
if you can just get beaten silly, that would be amazing.
If you let your dad do something to me, that would be funny.
I can invite a couple of officers I know to come by, let
Why
you
is
sass
Barry
to.
in that orange jumpsuit? I don't understand.
I'm sure the sheriff will help me
We're
out.
going to get a note. Barry's not allowed to play anymore.
I'm here with an ankle.
Well, since we're talking, before we talk about what's coming up tomorrow, since you guys can come back, BK, tell people where they can normally hear your live radio show.
The live radio show is every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon Eastern on WBHF Radio. That's WBHFradio.org if you want to stream it online or use the TuneIn app, the free TuneIn app. You don't even have to pay for it. And listen to us live from 10 a.m. to noon. We talk about movies, television, old things, new things, nostalgic things, Schoolhouse Rock, anything that you might remember from the past or maybe from today that we like. We talk about even movies from today. You can hear us every Saturday.
And Walt, the age-old question for us, where do people find more about us?
Just type thewilderride.com and you'll find all the places that you can find us around the web, from Twitter to Patreon, which we encourage you to go there and take a look. And if you like what you're hearing, please go over to iTunes, give us a 5-star rating, and make a quick comment so your vote gets counted so that more people can find our show.
And I want to give a shout out to Tara Bain. She is an associate producer supporter for our show at patreon.com/The Wilder Ride. So we get to mention all of the associate producers that decide to help support the show across whatever episodes that we decide to mention them. So we want to say thank you, Tara Bain, for making this possible. So guys, come on back tomorrow, minute number 62, where we find Inspector Kemp's arm appears to be stuck in that salute. And we will end with Frankenstein, Frank the Monster. We're going to talk about the creation, moaning with Frau Blucher. So come on back to more of the Wilder Ride.
I'm going to go fill up my large station wagon with a load of eggs tomorrow.
The dragon wagon.
Yeah,
That's right.
do I have your patience?